Hey everyone, welcome to episode 36 of the Sarah's podcast. Today's episode is with the legend Andreas Antona. Andreas is the owner of Simpsons Restaurant in Edgbaston, Birmingham, and the Cross Kenilworth in Warwickshire, and they both hold one Michelin star. Like that isn't enough, he also holds an honorary doctorate for hospitality, and he also founded Bocuse Academy and is now the chairman. Near the end of the podcast, we talk about books, and I lost my bearings as usual. But the book I was referring to, if anybody wants to read it or watch the series on Amazon Prime, is The Man in the High Castle. But talking of books, I have both of Andreas's cookbooks, and they are brilliant. So if you're into cookbooks, you need to really get these. For those of you that don't know who pays the podcast bills, then head over to worldofsarahs.com. Been updating our blogs, putting out transcripts of the podcasts, we doing episode articles, updating recipes for the fish cake mix, pea seasoning, and much, much more. Recently, we've added 2 spotlight articles, one about Mark Petru and one about Gem Octem, so be sure to have a read. Oh, and before I forget, if you do use our fish cake base mix, be sure to get in touch for the festive recipes or have a look on our blog. I just want to thank you all for the support and kind words. So many people coming in and listening to the Sarah's podcast from the beginning and playing catch up. In a few weeks, I'll also be doing a solo podcast and another podcast with Andrew Crook from the National Federation of Fish Fryers. So if anyone has any questions for either of us, just send them over by email or private message on social media. If you're new to this, then hit subscribe. This way, you get episodes downloaded straight to your device. I hope you enjoy this episode with Andreas Antona. Andreas, thanks for your time today.
Pleasure.
For those that don't know you, I always do this, give everyone a little bit of an insight. You were the owner of Simpsons Restaurant Edgbaston, The Cross in Kenilworth, and involved with Pure Bar Kitchen in Birmingham. Many would call you the godfather of food in Birmingham. Not all food, I guess, nice food. Yeah. You now hold an honorary doctorate for hospitality. And like all of this, and I've mentioned, it's not enough, you also founded the Bocuse UK Academy, and you are the chairman. But where'd you find the time, and what really excites you the most?
Well, time is how you use it. You know, obviously my main job is to run restaurants, but everything else I do is affiliated. To me, it's about, as I say to all young chefs starting, if you want to succeed in this job, it's not a job, it's a way of life. Mm-hmm. So you have to adopt that philosophy and embrace it, and then, you know, it becomes easier. So for me, it was never, it's 9 to 5. My whole world is immersed in restaurants, food, chefs, and anything associated with that.
And you don't get into this sort of job because you want an easy life. I've not met a chef yet that says, I'm going to go into chefing because it's easy.
Look, I've never seen it as easy, but I've never seen it as difficult.
No.
So for me, it was a natural progression from my childhood into running restaurants or becoming a chef. I grew up in a restaurant above the shop, so to speak. My dad had a restaurant below. So my earliest memories are of a restaurant. So that's where my life evolved. And everyone else that I knew in my family was involved somehow in the food industry. Mm. So, you know, it was easy in that sense. Yeah. You know, we had a... You know, my main focus was around food. Yeah. And that's my happiest memories are sitting round a table with my family, and in a funny old way, that is an extension of what I do. Still today. We call them paying customers, but that's in essence how I've evolved. It's been there's been no special journey. I just happened to be born into it.
So these days, do you manage to find the time to cook, or do you just sort of like, you take it?
Well, the trouble with cooking, I love, and it's my passion. And when I do go in there, I get really excited. I'm like the little kid in a sweet shop again. But the reality is, it's subjective.
Yeah.
And you have to have 100% commitment. So if you're committed to the kitchen, you could lose control of the business.
Yeah.
So for me, I prefer to do both.
Yeah.
So the difficulty you have is both require lots of subjective vision, and you have to have your finger on the pulse all the time.
Yeah.
So I'm there, but to actually run a service, that's what Luke does.
Yeah.
You know? He's the champion of that.
Yeah, of course.
That's Simpsons and Adam at the Cross.
So if we go back to sort of like your sort of pre-chef, your upbringing, what made you want to be a chef? So you said that your family were all doing it, but then did that not put you off to some degree? Because I think for many, being immersed in it can turn them the other way.
No, for me, the biggest shock was when they sent me to school.
Okay.
So I thought, well, what's going on here then? And I didn't like it.
Yeah.
They didn't like me, I didn't like them. And the only time I had...
You're on about the school, you're not on about your family.
No, the only time I enjoyed it was when I got back into back to the restaurant, and my granddad was in there, all my uncles were there. Well, not all, but a few of them. So they were always happy to see me. And I was always happy to help them out or do some things, or help my granddad wash plates to begin with, then help an uncle chop an onion and this and that. And that's how my life evolved. So it became, as I got older, the more I could do.
Yeah.
So by the time I got to college, I could cook.
Pretty skilled.
Yeah. But, I mean, the first 6 weeks where they're teaching you basic knife skills, etc., was a waste of time for me, because they didn't have to teach me that side of it. I was there. That's the way it was. You know?
What sort of restaurant was it?
It was, I suppose, a steakhouse, you would call it. You know, it evolved from a typical English eating house, where I grew up in the sort of late 50s, 60s, 70s, early 70s. Licensing changed in this country, and they could get a drinks license a lot easier. So once they started getting a drinks license, most of my family moved from a traditional eating house, which was most probably open for lunch and early dinners. Close at 9 o'clock, that sort of time. Last order's 8:30. And then they became steakhouses. Okay. So, all over West London, one way or another, my relatives were, had a steakhouse.
And would you say still lots of relatives in the business down there, or are they sort of retired a bit now?
No, most of them have retired, and one or two still involved in it. But my counterparts all went to school and studied, whilst I went to the kitchens and studied.
As you do.
Yeah.
The two notable people that you mentioned that you work for is Anton Michelin and Michael Quinn.
Yeah, they were big influences, because they were at the time of my life where you could look up to people and think, well, look, they're great role models. Yeah. I thought Mosiman was, the high-flying chef of his era, along with a few others. But, I particularly wanted to work for him because I lived and worked in Switzerland, and he was a big name in those days. So it was a natural progression. And then Michael Quinn, maybe not as big a name, but certainly became big, and he was a guy where I learnt the secrets of how to motivate people, and it's all about teamwork. He believed in teams. He believed that 4 brains are better than his one. Yeah. So he would listen to his senior sous chefs and everything else. So I thought, well, this guy's got it together. So I tried and pick, and I have done throughout my life. Pick and learn from everyone and everything. You can learn from anything and everyone. It could be a commie chef, but you've got to accept it that they sometimes see life a bit differently, and you can learn. Yeah,
of course. So what would you say so you said from Michael you learned mostly the team building and everything. What did you learn from Anton, would you say?
I suppose passion for food, perfection, cooking it to the right degree. He was always a great ambassador. He always was a great role model and lived that. And so you just learnt from being in his presence, really. He showed you how to behave. My first meeting with him, and I was so impressed that he was, when I went for my interview, that he's very humble, but also a great ambassador. He can fly the flag for world cooking, really? But he could really also get right down to the level and be kitchen porter's pal. Yeah. And I think that's a huge skill and testament to his being, really.
So, 1993, you open Simpsons in Kenilworth.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
I always have to check these things.
Yeah.
What was the thought process behind that? Kenilworth? Why Kenilworth?
Well, I suppose my wife's from Kenilworth,
Yeah.
so when we moved out of London, we lived in Kenilworth. So it was a natural place to look for a restaurant. It was in an era where there wasn't many chef patrons. We were sort of leading the way. There was one or two people that started up. But I just thought, it's my time now. I had my fill of working for large corporations and in the whims of people who I thought weren't as good as me, i.e. food and beverage managers and this and that. And, you're always party to being taken over, and you become part of a political game. Yeah. And all I was ever interested in was cooking food. So, but you get caught up in other things. In a big hotel.
Yeah.
And so I thought, well, my time has come. I need to find my own restaurant so I can just get away from it. And it was the best feeling in the world. And I still live on it because the shackles were off.
Yeah.
When I opened up Simpsons, the original Simpsons in Kenilworth, everything went out the window. And whatever I did, I had to survive on my wit. And I could pay my staff, pay my suppliers, pay your tax, and the rest is history. But those three things are still fundamental. So I only opened up really to try and make some money, and that is why you open up a business. It was never to attain this and that. That's been great, but it's not the first and foremost. The first and foremost is always to have a business that can thrive and survive and move forwards.
I know you've moved locations, we'll get onto that in a minute, but would you say that you've stuck true to the original vision, or has it evolved over the years?
Look, of course it evolves, but the basics are still the same. The basic building blocks are the same. How can that change? What should change?
Yeah.
It can grow, it can get bigger. You can have a chain of restaurants, but that was never me either.
No.
So for me, the fundamentals are always the same, but you can move and do whatever you like once you achieve profitability.
Yeah.
You've got to be profitable. Otherwise, you close the doors.
Yeah. And how long were you in Kenilworth for?
We were there for about 12 years.
Yeah. And then what made you take the leap?
Well, I thought that there was constraints within Kenilworth, small town. We lived in the middle of quite a prosperous area, so I haven't got an issue with Kenilworth, but it was a small town. The market was for always changing and moving, and you always had to be ahead of the game. But also at the same time, Birmingham, which is on our doorstep, had come of age. There was the thing called the Bullring development. And when I left Birmingham, when I moved from Plough and Harrow in the early 90s, it was just beginning to become, they were building Brimley Place, it was developing, it had moved away from a little, what I saw as a provincial town, and it was becoming a city.
Yeah.
But I think once the Bullring had come about, it had almost grown up and become an adult.
Yeah.
And now it's a thriving, I would say, international city.
Yeah.
So Birmingham, the transformation that it's gone through over the past 30 years has been so immense. But I realised when I was in Kenilworth, there was no provision for fine dining. So I was looking for a restaurant anywhere between Kenilworth, Birmingham, down towards Stratford, over to Kenilworth, in that sort of big triangle. And it just so happened to be that I came here, thought that this is a fantastic building, great potential. It's in the heart of the city. It's in leafy Edgbaston, a mile away from the Bullring. We're surrounded by greenery around here. So it was idyllic in that sense. So I thought, let's go for it. And I'm still here.
And how long have you been here now, would you say, this location?
I think we've been here about 13, 14 years.
Okay.
It's been empty it took us about 18 months to get it right.
Really?
It'd been, a lot of work went into it beforehand. Yeah, it was a building site for well over a year.
Would you say the landlords are sort of like easy-going? Are they quite supportive?
They're fantastic. Yeah. I couldn't wish for better landlords.
Yeah.
No, they're very, very supportive, and they bought into my vision, and I've bought into theirs, and the whole, the Edgbaston village is moving and developing, and it should be a thriving centre for loads of restaurants, and which it is. It's becoming that, and I'm very excited about the future and about their vision. They've still got that vision, and which is
so they're like long-term thinkers. They're quite long-term.
Yeah, I mean they've been doing it for a lot longer than I have, but obviously, I rely on their support, and they rely on me as well. So it's a great marriage. We work well together, and I enjoy working with them.
So now, obviously, it's a Grade 2 listed building, and you've been here since 2004, give or take, and now it's got rooms and a school.
Yeah.
So give us a vision behind how that came about, the vision, the school, and
Well, we used to do cookery classes at the old Simpsons.
Yeah.
And it was just, I suppose, then an extra stream of revenue. We're getting a lot of people saying, how do you do this? Oh, well, I love that, I'll do this. And I thought, well, look, why don't we have a little class and demonstrate a few things that we do?
Yeah.
And that's how it blossomed. So when we came here, there was a room which we converted into, it was a spare room. Rather than have another bedroom, I thought, well, look, it gives us another avenue. It's a way to project our what we do here at Simpsons and give people an insight as to what we do. And that's what we do primarily. We give them a little bit of what we do in terms of the menu. They come along and cook it. They spend the morning here. We show them around the kitchen, around the cellars, and give them a tour of behind the scenes of a restaurant, rather than here's an apple and a bit of pastry and make an apple pie. That's a bit boring. So I try and give them an insight into what we do and what we're about.
Do you think that's good in a way that, if they leave here seeing how a real restaurant works, that they will hopefully tell other people, and it sort of, in some ways, naturally educates people about the realness of a restaurant.
I've always thought part of a chef's job is to educate his customers in many different ways. But so that was always part of a natural process for me. Yeah, it gives them an insight. And that's why we do it, but it was never set out. We want to educate people.
No, of course not. But whilst you're here,
yeah.
So you opened Kenilworth Cross in 2014.
Yeah.
And again, what made you sort of want to open something closer to home? I know that's the opposite.
Well, what drew me to Kenilworth was the informality of having a pub.
Yeah.
I just wanted to explore to have a less full. I thought that the scene, the movement was moving away from boring, stuffy restaurants. And I just thought, well, look, I want something a little bit more informal, something that's a little bit more spontaneous. And so that's why we opened it up. I suppose, when we got a star within almost a year, it changed our direction slightly, but hey ho, we got it. Whether we wanted it as quick or remain, it's a different story. But we've got it. It's more challenging in a funny old way than Simpsons. It's more of a challenge because it's a one horse thing. You only go there to eat or have a drink, whereas Simpsons has got many different facets to it. So it's more challenging to run it as a business.
So what was the transition like from sort of everyday chef to restaurateur? How did you balance that?
Well, I suppose it's been easy because I've always seen a chef's role to be involved in every aspect of a restaurant, service, wines, and I've done that throughout my career. I did extra courses for Wine and Spirit Education Trust courses in winemaking when I was a lot younger, when I didn't have to, other chefs didn't.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to have an all-round vision, and I got involved. When you work in a big hotel like the Ritz, you have to have all the time you're talking to a restaurant manager. So it's teamwork.
Yeah.
So for me, it was a natural progression. There was never an issue of I'm now a chef and now I'm a restaurateur. It's been a progression, and I think a natural progression for most chefs is to become a restaurateur.
So today, do you expect sort of your chefs to always have a broader vision as opposed to just I'm a chef and I do X?
Well, if you were to walk around our kitchen, you'll soon see that they're encouraged to have that vision. And I think kids of today are far more switched on than what we were.
Yeah.
My structure was quite rigid. You came in as an apprentice, you worked your way up through various degrees of being a commis chef, then maybe a demi-chef de partie, then a chef de partie, then junior sous chef, maybe senior sous chef. So there was many hoops to jump through. Now, you know, I know apprentices, if they're on the right apprenticeship and they've done their time, could be senior sous chefs or even head chefs a lot quicker than in my era.
Yeah.
But they've got they're more inquisitive nowadays. There's so much more knowledge.
Do you think that's
out there?
Do you think that's because maybe back in the day people would have been afraid to sort of like ask a question to the head chef because it might have been seen as out of respect or out of that?
No. I think a head chef would want you to be informed and have knowledge. It was never I just think everything's so easy nowadays.
Yeah.
You know, on your
information,
phone,
yeah.
Information is there, and I would say that they're much more informed.
Yeah.
I think they're more informed than of my generation. They look at life totally differently. So, you know, it's a great place to be in for these kids.
Yeah.
And they're aware much more earlier, and they're astute, and they're more into fine-tuning than what we were.
So how important to you is it to attain Michelin stars? You've had Michelin star here since 1999. Within a year, you got it at Kenilworth. Yeah. Clearly, it's important. And obviously, in Birmingham, there weren't many, if any, before you.
Well,
so
we moved to Birmingham, and Glyn opened up Jessica's, and we both got a star that year. So we moved ours. He got one. Yeah. So, but then he'd worked for me for 9 years. So,
okay.
You know, so it wasn't a surprise to me. You know, he's a great chef. Well, look, do you open up a restaurant to get a Michelin star? No. And I've always thought that, and I still do. But if you open up a restaurant to get a Michelin star, then you either have to have loads of money. You know, it's the old adage, you know, I've made a small fortune because I've started with a bigger fortune, you know. And so... Yeah, I don't think that's what it's about. I think what it's about is to have a platform. And if you know, I've always looked at myself as a good craftsman. I'm interested in cooking as a craft, as a profession, as a job. And when you attain what you want to call master craftsman, then you should, in a funny way, automatically become a Michelin-starred chef. Yeah. Because that's what it's a progression again. Yeah. You know, so
obviously there was only you two back then, but now in sort of Birmingham, there's been a rising tide effect, essentially.
I mean, look, I think Birmingham, compared to other cities in the UK, is the second city. In terms of its size, its commercial activity, it's massive. It's next to London. So therefore, it's of no surprise to me that there's a market out there. Brummies are serious when it comes to food. They want great food. They travel well, they go all over the world, they see what they like and spend what they like. But when they come back to Birmingham, it's great for them to have quality here now as well. Yeah. And, okay, if I've been part of that movement, that's great. But, you know, I think that's progression again. It's the way the world works. So, you know, that's the way it is, and I'm hoping that we'll get even more Michelin star restaurant. Like this year, we've had a theme with that our first Indian restaurant outside London to get a star. We could have a Peruvian restaurant in the next year or two. Yeah. You know, I'm hoping that we'll be able to achieve far more as a city, because all it says is we're grown up, we're a big city, and there's some great restaurants here.
It brings more people to the area.
Yeah, it brings more people to the area. If you're here on international travel or business, you know, you've got a whole host of restaurants, and if you're here for 2 or 3 nights, we've got a chance of picking 1 or 2 of those people up. That's all there is to it, you know.
Yeah, when I spoke to Adam from Adams, he said about you that you are one of the most... Well, he found that you're very... supportive, complimentary, always there to help if anybody needs help. And he was saying sort of like, well, I sort of took from that's a really good thing of you to do, because not many people would do that. They just see that on the short term, could be competitive, but you're actually quite the opposite. You're quite...
Well, you know, we all work in a very small industry. Yeah. We all know each other. We're all friends with each other. And it's just an extension of life, you know. Why should I help another human being, especially another chef? Yeah. You know, for me, that's what it's about. And you soon learnt that, you know, if you run out of a fillet steak in the West End, you rush down to the next door and say, can we borrow one of your fillets and get it back tomorrow? Yeah. You know, it's just part of that sort of mentality. Of course, we're all here to help each other. Why should you just look after your own fiefdom? It's not a particularly healthy place if you do that. So I just break down those barriers.
No, it was everyone that I've spoken to about you has been very complimentary, to be honest, and that says a lot about you. So why don't you like your name above the door?
It's not that I don't like. I suppose maybe if I did it now, I might think about it. But it's my food then, and I was looking at life slightly differently.
Yeah.
My food and how I evolved was modern British food, heavily influenced by classical French training. But my name is Greek Cypriot, and if I had that above the door, I didn't want to have the connotations of Greek Cypriot food. I wanted to do my food. That's why we chose an English name.
The waters a little bit.
Yeah, maybe 25 years ago, different world, different time.
Yeah.
Maybe now I'd think differently again. A name is a brand, and that's most probably another reason why I didn't want to know it, because it's, when you're not here and I'm at the cross, they say, well, look, why isn't he at Tona's if he's... why is he at the cross? His name's above the door here, but I suppose it's...
So it give you a bit more flexibility almost.
Yeah, but I thought that at the beginning.
Yeah.
I didn't want... That was one of the reasons. Or the main reason, really.
Do you see yourself opening any more restaurants?
Watch this space, that's all I can say. If the right opportunity comes along, obviously, I'll be stupid not to. But, I'm not getting any younger, that's the other thing. So.
What was it like in the early days, sort of being sort of like in some ways the Lone Ranger in Birmingham after all your experience in London, a little bit of time in 10 years or whatever in Kenilworth? What was it like in Birmingham in the early days? Like, what were people's expectations?
Well, I was fortunate because I've worked in Birmingham since the mid-80s.
Yeah.
When I was head chef at the Plan Harrow.
Okay.
When that was the fine old lady of hotels in the whole of the Midlands, let alone Birmingham. So I had an insight into it, but still in those days we had the captains of industry in every day, the law, everyone that was in terms of commerce. That was our lunchtime trade. Yeah. Very, very busy. And it was like being in the West End, because we'd have guys come in and they want this and they want that. And if it was in the fridge, we could cook it.
Yeah.
So that was great. And at the weekend, we had a great clientele here from Edgbaston, and it was the place to be seen and to go to. So I knew Birmingham of that era. So, when I came back, it had moved from that to an international city. It was then, I thought, a provincial town, because I grew up in London, so exactly. I had different eyes then.
Yeah, so it was always going to be like a smaller... Yeah, it's always going to feel smaller to you as such.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose it's just one little facet of London, but London's villages. But if you're a village and you live in Mayfair, or you live in Kensington, or you live in St John's Wood, or you live in the West End, or it's all little villages, and they've all got their own identity. But each little village has got a massive customer base. Yeah. But that customer base of one village is the whole of Birmingham, and that's how I look at it. So their marketplace is far bigger. It's massive compared to ours, but we've still got a marketplace in Birmingham. We've got some very influential, wealthy people that work and live and run businesses in this city, and they're our customers.
You're very well known also for building great teams. Where do you think that sort of comes from? What's your focus on? With building up great people.
I suppose the older I get, the more if I do think about that, I suppose it's my whole being from a family.
Yeah.
It started with me as a family. It was a small team and a fine team, and we all worked and lived together. And that's how I've carried on. Yeah. I mean, I remember coming back for having worked in Germany in the West End. It was quite, in one way pathetic, but another way I could see it. But if you run out of parsley on one section and you wanted to go and borrow it off another section, they wouldn't give it to you. And I'm thinking, these guys have lost the plot here, because they're forgetting what this is all about. Yeah. And it's a customer. So my focus is about that, and trying to develop a team whose main focus is about our customers.
Yes, it's just, there's no egos in the kitchen as such.
No, we all have a role. Yeah. When I go in now, I have a role, but everyone has a role.
Stay out of the way. Or...
No. I mean, no, it's never been like that. No. I respect all our guys, and we've got over the years, the ones I really like working with are the younger commies, because I like to see them developing. Yeah. From a young chef, and they grow up 20 years later, hopefully they're at the top of their trade.
Do you think you see less chefs coming through? Less younger chefs coming through?
No. They're becoming scarcer because I think as an industry, we let people down in a funny old way. We work long hours, it's cheap pay, it's not a great wage and all the rest of it. So, when they come in, their eyes are opened. You're only going to survive if you've got the passion. So the ones that are here are full of that passion, and they see themselves, this is always a stepping stone in their career. So hopefully they'll go on from here and they'll blossom. We encourage them to go to bigger and better restaurants anywhere in the world. So that's how I see it.
In terms of like chef shortages, for example, do you think that's because there's less chefs, or is it just because there's more restaurants?
Well, that's partly.
Yeah.
There is a demographic issue with young people in this country. It boosts up again. There weren't enough born whenever it was 16 or 17 odd years ago. You see that in every industry, but that hopefully will come better in a few years' time. But the challenge there is, you can go and start a job and sit in front of a computer and earn 25 grand straight away. Yeah. Whereas here, it's nowhere near that, and you're working longer hours in an environment that's not as good. So we, as an industry, we need to rise to certain challenges. So
you really need to, like you say, if you've got to be the type of person that accepts this is a whole change of life almost, to really get into it and really be passionate about it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I always say to them, look, if you want to carry on in this job, you've got to have it's a way of life. I cooked a dinner the other night at Cambridge University. We went with two of the chefs, me, Luke, and another lad, and one of our waiters. We cooked for 50 fellows at Cambridge University, a vegan meal of all things. But they see that as part of what they want to do at the university. So we were happy to oblige. But then in the kitchen, when we walked in, there was some lad in the corner, and they said, "Fred's helping you." So I said, "Where are you from, Fred?" And he was an apprentice in a pub across the road. He's a lecturer from college heard that we were in and asked the head chef, can he come and work with us? And he was very, very enthusiastic when we took to him. But what I said to him, look, Fred, he was asking me, I've only ever wanted to be a chef since the age of 10. How have you done it? And this, that, and the other. I said, look, whatever you do, forget about your life and find a new life, because this is what you've got to do to succeed. If you love the job, as you say you do, then immerse yourself in it and you will succeed.
How do you think it's all going to go moving forward? 4-day weeks, trying to give everyone more balance, because that obviously goes opposite to what we're saying here. So how do you balance the two, reconcile the two?
Well, if you want me to be completely honest,
which is the best thing,
I think politicians should keep their noses out of people's lives and not tell us what to do. We've got this interference by governments at every level of society and life. And the trouble is, they live in a bubble and it's an ideal world. But this is the real world. And will the twain, shall it ever meet? I don't think it ever will. So there's always going to be a battle. Of course, I'd love all of my chefs to do 35 hours a week and 4 days a week and earn the money they do. But the reality is, as the economy develops in this country in particular, it's become cheaper and cheaper.
To eat out?
Well, the costs of everything that you do in life, you go to compare site for this, you go to this, you want cheap flights, cheap this, cheap cars, cheap petrol, the whole world. And I think the cost of what we actually do hasn't kept up. So therefore, I can't see how it's ever going to meet that people like me can afford to give our staff the vision that they want. It doesn't work. And the best thing they could do, most politicians, is go out and get a bloody job. Because we don't need half the politicians that are in place, in situ at the minute.
Pretty much agree with that.
Yeah.
How do you, even at every level, how do you maintain value for money and not just be a restaurant for high days and holidays? Because you've got to offer value,
Well, I think the rate is set by the industry itself. We can't outprice ourselves. We can't do anything. We always look at what everyone else is doing. And I think that's not a great parameter to use, but that is the reality.
Yeah.
So, if you want a burger, it's, any price between $7.95 or $6.95 to $15.95. If you want a Michelin star meal, it's so much. If you want whatever, chain restaurant, it's so much. So, but the good thing is, it fits everyone's pockets.
Yeah.
So, we fit into that, but, the reality is it's always cheap.
Yeah.
And sometimes there's not enough in the pot to have the vision that governments want us to have.
So where do you think the discrepancy is? What we're talking, 5%, 10%? Like in a real world, where would you love to be? 10% more, 15% more, less, or would you like to see better government support, like less VAT or something like that? How do you?
VAT is a great one. Another one is if you've earned your money and you leave the waiter a quid. Why should the government? Presumably you've paid tax on your pound. But then the waiter has to pay more tax on it.
It's like they're double dipping a bit.
All over the place.
Yeah.
The whole system is it's shot. But that's the way this is society. It's a funny old place from where I sit. And you have so much interference all the time. So VAT, how true it is. In France is 4% for restaurants. I hear. Here it's 20%. But the reality, if governments were big enough and savvy enough, they would give me 10% back, and then over a 3-year period, I'd have to open up another business and another business. Because I'm better at it than what they are.
Yeah.
They're completely useless at it. So, they're not being clever.
I suppose the way the tax system in this country doesn't celebrate the entrepreneur, it penalises him or her. And I think, whereas in America, I think that the way it's geared up, from what I understand, is that it's there to sort of encourage.
Yeah, I mean, the system's different.
Yeah.
I'll give you a good example of, I most probably, when I first opened up, paid a waiter $2.50 an hour, but then they could earn another £5 an hour, $7.50, 25 years ago. Now, I pay them $8, whatever it is, on a minimum wage, and they don't get much tips because people don't want to part with money. So, in relative terms, it hasn't gone up. The wage hasn't gone up.
No.
But restaurant or owners like myself are more penalised. Yeah, we've taken the burden, which is great, but you can only go so far. And depending on who comes in, we've got an election coming up soon, it could be a total disaster or even more of a disaster. So that's the way I look at it, either one or the other. But they need to change.
Well, I think a podcast we did with a chap in the early days, he said that it's the most least business-friendly government we've had for a long time.
This lot are, yes. Yeah. But then the other lot aren't any better.
No, they're going to be even worse than some. Well, traditionally, based on what we've seen. So, but obviously, everything's been lumped on the employer, PAYE, pensions, everything. Yeah,
but it's not that they're bringing in new legislation. Oh, it's good to do this or it's good to do that, and every sort of crackpot idea that comes onto some minister's desk, they turn it into a law. But the problem is, it's always businesses that are asked to pay for this.
Yeah.
And people aren't aware of it. So
I think one of the biggest things with VAT, for argument's sake, regardless of what the rate is, I think that it's wrong that we don't tell people what the VAT element is. So, like, for example, in America, it's a sales tax, not a VAT. And you'll go to a store and something's $10. You go to pay for it and it's $12. I think they know what sales taxes are. They would protest them more so.
I don't know how true this is, but I was told that VAT was introduced into this country to get away from pay as you earn, because it was a fairer system of tax. Because the more you earned, the more you spent, the more you contributed to the exchequer. So they were going to do away with it. But I think, obviously, it was another guy's by then government, I think it might have been Harold Wilson, to get more money. And he needed more money because they promised them the earth and they couldn't deliver it. But, that's always been the case. But look, I'm not here to sit on and talk about politics because, this isn't about a political thing. It's about the reality of where we are at today.
I think for me, just to press one more point on the VAT, is that this is something I've always said in our industry, is that I understand it's a value-added tax, and hot food or restaurant food, takeaway food, is seen as a luxury. But is it? In the year 2019, is eating out a luxury?
No, it's a way of life.
Yeah.
It's a way of life, but don't forget they are most probably 25 years behind times. But no, if you look at, let's say, when we had the crash in 2008-9, when the banking crisis came, We had to change our businesses, but we survived. If that had happened 30 years beforehand, it would have been a disaster. We would have had to close the business because in those days, people that used to go out to eat was special occasions and business.
Whereas now you've got volume.
Yeah, and even like today, through government interference again, people who want to dine out in terms of business can't do it because it's a gift in kind or whatever. So they don't understand what they're doing. They don't free up business. And that's, for me, is freeing up business. Let business drive this, and you don't need governments. I think governments are too central to the well-being of our daily lives. Yeah. They should govern, and there's enough laws and the rest of it till the cows come home. So they should just stop. You only need 200 or 300 MPs. You don't need this bloody big fat thing called Parliament and Westminster and the circus that it's become.
You see a lot in the news about how women aren't represented properly in the hospitality industry, or proportionately. Yeah. What are your views there?
Well, I've never looked at it like that. And, when I started cooking, it was male-dominated. And when I got to the Ritz, it was all males. Yeah. And I met my wife in the Ritz kitchens. She was the second ever female in its illustrious history ever to work in the kitchens as a chef. Okay. And I was really proud of that. But as a chef, when she stood next to me or next to the other chefs and she was doing the work, I couldn't give a damn. It's a pair of hands for me. And, if they're male or female, does it, and she was then paid the same as a male commie. So we've never really had this sort of thing that, other employers or other industries have. If it's a female and they're doing the same job, they get a commie's wage or a chef de party's wage, sous chef's, head chef's wage.
There's no sous chef for female and sous chef for male. It's just sous chef.
Yeah, and it doesn't matter. So I think we've been slightly, because of historically we didn't have them, and then all of a sudden we did because of shortages. And certainly some of them nowadays are fantastic chefs, they're brilliant chefs.
Also, I think what's probably changed with the hospitality industry to some degree is that people do it because they want to. People of your generation may not have did it because they wanted to. I think someone said, chefs used to be thick back in the day. We didn't know how to do other things, and I can't remember who it was that said that, but, because now you see educated chefs coming through the ranks.
Yeah, you see all sorts, but in my day, to be a chef, you didn't have to have O-levels, A-levels, all this sort of stuff. You just went to college, and it was a technical college, and you did your sitting guilds. But I remember when I was at school, I had to go to a careers officer in West Ealing, and off I went, and I think he had all my paperwork from the school, and he said, well, what do you want to be, a soldier or a policeman?
Oh, really?
And I said, no, I want to be a chef. He said, oh, all right then, go and see these people. And off he sent me to Ealing Technical College.
And that was it.
And that was it. But he was happy to send me because I didn't have anything. All right, we got this.
Difficult.
We got this one off our case. He wants to be a chef. So you put him into that. And there's always a story of our butcher, Peter Allen, when he was at a drinks party and they said, well, what does your son want to be? And he said a chef, and they said, oh dear, I am sorry. But that is the English attitude, because it is a job where it's not recognised as a profession. It hasn't got chartered this or that.
In Europe, especially, it is seen as a profession of being a waiter or a chef. And I was chatting to Steve Lachlan, who is the front of house at the Boat Inn in Lichfield, and he goes, I feel that the British have always had this arrogance of we are to be served, not to serve. Yeah. And that probably goes back to the Imperials or that,
where it comes from I'm not too sure, but certainly it's frowned upon. But I will say this, and it's a big statement, that it takes a chef from 0 to 10 years to become a head chef, and it most probably takes a student doctor about the same period, but they've got a recognised body behind them. We haven't, and that's a weakness within our own industry. I see that. But to have the confidence to cook anywhere in the world, to open up a kitchen, to employ a team of chefs, to run a restaurant, and to cook and be part of that is a 10-year project. 8 if you're lucky, if you're clever enough.
So how you sort of started, and you were lucky because it was a family business, but that's not as easy for people to do, is it? Like, for argument's sake, if I had a 14-year-old, 50-year-old son and I said to you, I want him to work with you here, straight away you're going to think, well, I can't do that. Or can you do that? Can you do it without the college courses?
Well, we've had people come and say, look, I want to be a chef, but I don't want to go to college.
Okay.
But I will say, no, you go to college if you want to work here.
All right.
Because you need a piece of paper, you need a qualification, because you might not want to be a chef in 5 years' time, but at least you've got a qualification. That piece of paper counts for something. Mm-hmm. So if you want to put that into a credit to do something else, you do that.
Yeah.
So I think not to have a qualification is not right.
Yeah.
So I think, we send all our people to colleges.
So from that point of view, you're not doing it because there's no snobbery there. You're doing it for their own good. You're saying, you've got something, like something.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it many times before. Oh, I want to be a chef, but I don't want to go to college. It's a waste of time. I've got great talent, blah, blah, blah. And then 3 weeks later, they realise that this is hard work.
Yeah.
They're the lucky ones after 3 weeks, but it could be 3, 4, 5 years down the road. But at least you've got something. You've done a course.
Yeah,
it
wasn't for nothing.
And then you can get a credit on that course and say, look, you can go and do a foundation degree program in computer science, but that can help you get there.
What do you think have been the key changes over the years, in the hospitality industry?
Look, it's forever changing. Mm-hmm. It's moving all the time. You have to be abreast of it, keep ahead of it. Life changes. It's not just our industry, it's everything. I suppose the advent of foreign travel changed the perception of what food should be in this country. When I was a kid, you go around Marks and Spencer's with your mum and it was like jammy donchas and maybe chicken. That was about it. Now you've got a whole host of every cuisine under the sun.
Yeah.
But why is that? It's because Brits started travelling abroad and they wanted to come back. The society became maybe more diverse. Other cultures coming in, opening up their own restaurants. So as we've developed as a country, they say the chicken tikka, tandoori chicken is the national dish, or it was not so long ago. In my area, it was roast beef.
Yeah.
So it has changed, it has moved, and I think it's for the better, but it makes us more grown up.
Yeah. So I think it's more civilised. People like to eat out a lot more in the UK now, don't they?
Yeah, and you've got everything that's under the sun,
Yeah, it's not just...
And it's good quality now.
Yeah.
There's great chefs from every country in the world, and I see this as one of the culinary destinations of the world. Certainly London. They're going about New York, but I certainly think that London's up there. Paris isn't as diverse as this. Other great cities around the world aren't as diverse as we are generally, or let's say London. So and I suppose Birmingham is a reflection of that.
Well, it was a melting pot. So many different nationalities in Birmingham as well, wasn't it? You had cancer in 2010. What do you think, aside from the fact that you're still here and you're healthy now, what changed in you? What thoughts did you have running a business? Did you have a different outlook on business or anything? Not
really. I suppose you go into a hole, and then I was lucky I came out the other end. So you appreciate little things. When I was in there, all I wanted to do was walk round a park, believe it or not. I wanted to see a blue sky, green grass and trees. Strange thing to say, but that's what kept me going. Yeah. Real basic things.
Yeah.
So when I got back to work, did I change? Look, you learn to appreciate it. I love working here. I love working with the young people. I like seeing my kids, how they develop, how they blossom. And what I do here is a similar thing. So... yeah, look, I think life's for living and death is for the dead. So when you're here, live it. And that's what I try and do. You're long time dead. So, that's how I don't look at it in any other terms than that. I was one of the fortunate ones. Lots of guys I know succumb to it. And it's a shame. It's a loss of talent and a loss of a friend. And I feel sad, of course. But, I mustn't dwell on that. And... when in your moments you think about them, we're all on that road. There's, you're born, you live, you work, you pay your taxes, and you die. They're about the only few things that are certain in life. So it's a journey, and that's the way I look at it. and long may it continue.
It's a nice way to think about it. What do you love about the hospitality industry?
In one word, people.
Yeah.
And I think that's what everyone will ultimately say, but I love working with great teams. I love meeting other teams. I love meeting other chefs, other restaurateurs, other restaurant managers, sommeliers, whatever it may well be, plus our guests.
Yeah.
You know, it's about people and life. And, you know, the great thing about a restaurant, it affords you a little bit of time to know people. And the more you delve, the more you know. And there's some great people around, some really interesting people around, some people that are really interested in what you do. And so therefore, it just makes up life, you know.
Because it's one of the rare businesses that you do actually get to meet more people. Like,
Yeah.
And actually, like you say, make time to talk.
Yeah.
Whereas, you know, if you're not knocking it, but if you're working in London and you're jumping on the tube every day, you're not meeting people, are you? You're bumping into people, or they're in your way. But,
yeah. But I mean, but the problem you have when you sometimes see a face and I think, oh God, is that Birmingham, Kenilworth, or wherever?
Yeah.
I know faces. I don't always know names.
You need someone to whisper in your ear and say,
Yeah.
That's John. He does this. That's what you need. You need a person for that.
Yeah. I'm not great at that.
So, if you could change one thing, just one thing today for the hospitality industry, for the benefit of the hospitality industry, what would it be?
That.
Yeah.
Most probably.
What would you reduce it to?
Well, why pay it? You know, we
Yeah.
pay other taxes, but look, I don't know, at least half.
Yeah.
You know, when not so long ago, they reduced it to 15. It was a great help. But, you know, there's many other things, so I can't look at it as a...
That's a selfish one, isn't it? It's not.
So,
who has been mostly influential to you over your career, or recent, or however, whatever?
Look, I try and look and learn. And it was that look and learn. When I was a little kid, I can't remember what ages, there was a comic that came out, and it was called Look and Learn, and it was full of interesting facts.
Oh, really?
And it went out, so I used to get it every week. Then it went out, bump or whatever, it sort of transformed into something else after a couple of years. And I just thought Look and Learn's a great thing. So, you know, I can't say I was really influenced other than my family when I was at school. But when I went to college, I looked up to my lecturer, Alan, and Eddie McIntyre. They were great influences then. And then I went into cooking, and I always thought, well, I look up to the head chef because that's what I want to be one day. So I looked up to them and tried to see what they did and how they behaved and things like that. And you go through life like that, you know, you look and learn. You know, when you get to the big job, you know, or you want to work for Mosiman, or you want to work for this, or you want to work for that, you want to do that because there's a calling from within and you want to learn. So, you know, I could be reading a book, and I think, oh, look, let's look at that author. You know, he's a great guy. You know, I have a whole wealth of experience. Then I suppose when I came into business, I looked, you know, I got a lot of well, maybe they didn't, but I looked at them as mentors, and that was my butcher, Peter Allen, my wine merchant, Pierre Henk, and Bernard France. They were older businessmen. They'd been in business older than me, and I thought, well, look, they're still going. What are they doing? So I'd ask them stupid questions. I'd ask my father-in-law, who was a very successful businessman, about business. So, you know, there is always a need to learn, and you have to have an acceptance. And you don't know it. You think you know it, but you've got to always ask and make sure. So that's the way I've always been. So I'm not afraid. And, you know, if I learn off a commis chef, I'm happy.
Yeah.
And I hope I make him happy. That's life.
You take lessons from anywhere.
Yeah.
Which is important.
Yeah.
So I suppose in some ways you can learn a lesson by somebody else's lesson.
Well, look, I mean, for me, the best way to learn is a mistake.
Yeah.
And I love mistakes. I embrace them. The problem we have with a mistake is if you keep doing the same mistake day in, day out, then I think, well, look, how can we help you?
Yeah.
Because there's some fundamental issue why you don't understand this.
Yeah.
So we do get to that stage sometimes, but we're there still to help. So you learn, and I always say, look, they always say, sorry, chef, I made a mistake. I said, well, look, learn from it, move on.
Yeah.
You know, we can accept mistakes.
What would you say is your favourite all-time restaurant?
Christ.
Is there one? Was it many?
Look, in this country, I love going to the waterside inn. Okay, people say it's this, that, and the other, but I just think it encompasses all the traditions and values of what a good restaurant should be, right on the banks of the River Thames. I've got a little soft spot for the Thames, you know. So, but then there's all sorts of other restaurants. I don't think I've ultimately found it, but there's a place we go to every year in Portugal that I love going to, called Rai de Praias. You know, it's in Ferraguda, a little beach restaurant. That's well run, great fish, great food, in a fantastic setting. So for me, food, it's a moment. I can't say that was the best meal I ever had, and I always want to go back there.
It's the whole package, the experience.
And it's a moment of life. And now those feelings of that particular moment. Yeah. That's what I try and go back to.
What would you say is your all-time favourite food? And again, that probably builds into what you just said, experiences and everything, feelings.
Look, I mean, most chefs, I mean, you're always asked these questions and you say, well, it's going to be a lobster starter with caviar and a fillet steak.
You're going to tell me it's a kebab, aren't you?
Yeah, most probably. Yeah, let's go for a kebab, you know. I've answered it with Alpen in the past. I think these questions, I'd never get these questions, you know. It's a moment for me.
Is there an ingredient you really dislike, though? Like that, as in like to cook with every
I hate parsnips.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I can't stand parsnips.
Why is that then?
I just thought the texture, the taste, you know. I spend, you know, I suppose most of Europe feeds pigs on it. We tend to eat them, which is fine.
They've got like a drier texture than a carrot and a stringier texture.
Yeah, they're more fibrous, and they've got this thing that I don't. There's I suppose in Greek gologasin, it's the same sort of texture. I hate that. You know, every time my mum made it, I couldn't eat the stuff.
Taro.
Yeah, taro. You know, it's sort of Jamaican as well. Big in Jamaica and Cyprus. So those sort of things aren't my favourite, but parsnips really stand out. You know, and when they go in and they say, oh, it's a parsnip soup as a little amuse-bouche, I think, oh, my God, no thanks.
Probably has to be a soup, to be fair.
Yeah, but you know, I'll have it. But, you know, I'll try and avoid them.
So what ingredient is a pure delight to work with? Like the complete opposite to that? Like, you know, is there one that you get and you think, oh, I love cooking with this? Like, you know, like...
No,
there isn't.
But no, not really.
Just because anything that's not that then.
Yeah, anything that's not that, and you know, we'll do all sorts of things. You know, we're always looking and learning and trying to find new tastes and flavours. So I can't say, oh, you know, I love Hereford beef, because then, you know, whatever.
You're not racist about where the beef comes from, as long as it's good.
Well, no, I think good food nowadays is about the provenance of food. So we are far more picky as to what we do, and we're always exploring, and we're always looking for new suppliers, great suppliers.
Years ago, like even up to maybe the 2000s, like it was always about Scottish beef, and you know, Welsh lamb, let's say. But now, like, you know, everyone's gone like very local. Like,
I mean, look, if you had asked me the question, would I do it all over again? I said yes, but the only difference this time, I would go and find my ideal location, and I would buy a 40-acre plot because I want to grow some of it, and I want to have control of what I grow and bring to the table. And if I could have a nearby farm or something like that, could supply some of the meat or this or that, I think that's where the shift has gone over the years. So provenance, growing your own, looking for new flavours, etc. Yeah, I think that's very inspiring, and I do admire the younger breed of chefs that have got these facilities on you know, Tommy Banks, Simon Rogan, Simon Holston. They've got all these facilities to hand, and I think that's the next level. So, if, you know, as a chef, you'd like to have that, you know, Raymond Bloch at the Manoir, you know. So if I did it all over again, if I was a young man starting out, I'd say, I don't want two shops on the high street slapped together. You know, I'd want a bit of land and make more of that. Because I think that's part of it. You know, I'm trying to do that at because I'm also governor at the University College Birmingham. I'd love to try and get some courses for chefs where they're out on the field and they're growing veg, you know, from field to fork type of stuff.
Sense.
So that's really, really exciting for me. I think that's, so provenance of food, quality of food, that is a huge move to my day. Massive. It used to be, if you wanted a Michelin-starred restaurant, you have veal, caviar, lobster, foie gras, top beef from Scotland on the menu, and off you go. Truffles, and off you go.
Yeah.
Lots of cream. But now, it could be the oddest cut from the oddest animal in the world.
Yeah.
And you can actually do it. So the world has changed.
Yeah.
All for the better.
Definitely.
Because we've got the old stuff, we've got the new stuff.
A lot more variety.
Yeah.
What chef for you is really rocking it at the moment?
Well, look, I travel and I eat. I'd most probably want to go to Franson in Stockholm. I loved when I went to Azumendi. I like going up to L'Enclume in this country. I want to go and try Sat's food again. I want to go. So, there's lots of places,
Yeah. You
I always
can't just
travel.
narrow it down, no.
Yeah. I haven't got a local favourite restaurant. I've got a go-to restaurant for, if I'm with for different occasions. If I'm out with my wife, we want it easy. But if I want to see something, I was with my wife in Paris. I asked Claude where to go. I went, and it was, really, really good, but very, very classical, but fantastic food.
So I want you to impress me, because I asked you earlier if you have a favourite book, and you said no. You essentially have a library of favourite books.
I have loads. I have loads and loads of books,
Give me some that everyone should own.
Oh, God. I can't. I think everyone should read Black Box Thinking by Matthew Syed. I'm reading Outliers. I've got 2 or 3 books on the go at the time. Yeah. Philip Kerr was a guy that I found only last year. He had a book of 12. Bernhard, whichever way, detective in sort of Berlin in the Nazi era, solving cases. And they were like, I can lose myself in these books for some time. But he had 12 books, so I had to read all 12 books. Joe Nesbo, it could be. But I tend to, believe it or not, my real passion is reading historical books. So, I read a lot about the Roman Empire, Byzantine Empire, and things like that. So I read. And I suppose if I was to have another life and I had to have another job, I'd have been a don in Byzantine history and been based in Oxford in a little room surrounded by books. I would have been happy as a pig in that.
I can read anything about Rome. I love Rome.
Yeah.
Anything about Rome.
So I think, there's a lot to learn.
Yeah.
And when you go around some of these sites, you realise how sophisticated life was.
Yeah.
Without things like electricity and all the rest of it. We think we're advanced, but I think they were more advanced than us.
Yeah.
So
there's a really interesting book. I need to get it and I'll find it. And they just did a series on it on Prime, and it's about it's fiction, and it's about what life would be like. Well, it's a whole story about. It assumes that the Germans won the war. And it's really weird because it shows like Times Square with like the Nazi banners and everything. And it plays with your head because, if they did win the war, then obviously they probably would have progressed. The Japanese and then won the war. And I really the name's just left my head now of the book. And it's a really interesting book because when you read it and you watch the film as well, or the series, it's just so strange because the Germans and the Japanese won the war. And, and it's just so odd, but I'll find you that because if you like books, that's a bit of a mind bend.
It's a paradox, something completely different.
It's a complete mind bend.
Yeah.
But on that, mate, we'll leave it there. And thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
And is there anything that I've missed out and been unprofessional about?
No, let's do it again.
We might have
the update.
I've probably missed out loads of stuff.
Yeah.
But no, thank you for your time, mate.
Okay, not at all. Pleasure. Thanks.